Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event.
Hello and welcome to today's Earmark webinar, Converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. I'm Joel from the Earmark team. If you have any questions, please use the comments section and I'll be monitoring that. And with that, I'll turn it over to today's host, Alicia Katz Pollock.
Thanks so much, Joel. I'm really happy to be here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. It's been one of the things that I'm doing most in my company these days, and so I'm really happy to share what I've learned and some of my best practices with you. So the reason why this came to be today was because I am the co-host of the Unofficial QuickBooks Accountants podcast with Hector Garcia. And back last year, he discovered that I had an outline of all of my step-by-step instructions when I'm doing a conversion, when I'm taking a desktop file and moving it to online. And he was kind of surprised and shocked to find out that my outline was 5 pages long. And so he was like, well, let's do that on the podcast. And so we started going through the outline. And instead of one episode, it turned into a string of 4 different episodes. And so once Earmark saw that, they're like, oh, we think you should do a course on it. And so here we are. And in fact, when I was prepping for this, I started writing out all of the content, and it turned into not just that 5-page outline, but a 70-page book. So I was like, you know what? Let's turn this into a book on Amazon. So literally, as of today, there's a new book on Amazon called The Comprehensive Guide to Converting from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. And so the link is up there. And this is all of the content that I'm presenting today, but then way even more detail and explanation. And it's only $9.99. And so it's everything. I'm going to talk about as much of the book as I can today, but then anything that I don't have time to cover in an hour, that's where you can go to find out more resources for it. So a little bit about me while everybody is sitting down and getting started. My name is Alicia Katz Pollock, and I'll be your tour guide for today. My own website is royalwise.com, and what I do is QuickBooks training. I have an extensive CPE-based QuickBooks training center, all the way from I've never seen QuickBooks Online before, or I'm a diehard desktop user, what is this newfangled QBO stuff, all the way up through literally every single feature and technique in QuickBooks Online, from how to use it to best practices to hidden tips and tricks. And I'm also the host of QB Talks with Insightful Accountant. I'm a top 50 woman in accounting, top 10 ProAdvisor from Insightful Accountant. And I just absolutely love talking about and teaching people to use QuickBooks Online. So hopefully you will learn some cool stuff today. So in this conversation about moving from desktop to online, the way that I'm going to approach the content today is, first I want to talk about managing the project and how to think about the conversions. I'll do a little bit about choosing your version of QuickBooks Online, how to prep your file for migration, how to actually do the conversion itself, and then once you're converted, what are the initial setup steps that you absolutely have to take. And then I want to talk about some concierge services, which is the way that I think about really making a comprehensive experience for your clients. So those are all the things that we're going to talk about. Throughout today, I'm going to be touching on other topics. It's because, in 1 hour, there's only so much that I can talk about, and I can talk for hours about QBO. So take a look for some other little QR codes that are other courses that I have that dive deep into those topics. And so you might want to have your phone handy with the camera on, and then you can hold it up to the screen and tap the QR code for any courses that you're interested in finding more about. So the first thing that we need to do when we are getting ready to do a desktop migration is your planning stages. So let's talk about the things that you have to plan for. The first thing is actually managing the whole project from inception all the way through integration. And I actually want to start with the emotional part of it. I mean, the software is the software, but when you're moving somebody from desktop to online, one of the things that you have to do is really manage the experience, and the people don't like change. And what I find with people who have been using desktop, and especially those of you who are ProAdvisors who you've been using desktop for years, you have an expertise. You are really good at what you do, and you're comfortable and you're facile and you can get around and you're powerful within the program. And then you look over at QBO and it's a whole different beast. I mean, sure, it has the word QuickBooks in the title, but that's pretty much the only thing that the two pieces of software have in common. And so people expect when they're moving from desktop to online that it's just you're taking the same look and feel and you're putting it on a browser, and it doesn't look like it. It doesn't act like it. The commands are in different places. And I kind of like to joke that desktop to online is like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, where Ginger Rogers does everything that Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in high heels. And that's what QBO is like. The first thing that you have to do when you are making a migration is learn where all your familiar features are. You're used to clicking on this and then clicking on this, and now you just have to find out where those similar places are to click. And getting past that, oh my God, I don't know where anything is, this fear of the unknown, the fact that you're a little bit slowed down for a little while as you learn the new system. These are all the things that you have to build into the migration. You can't just say, oh, it's going to be great. You have to actually prep people emotionally for the change. And you kind of have a choice. You can either have a frustrating experience or you can have a glorious, enlightening experience. And it all comes in by how you approach it. If you can get people looking forward to it and excited about the new possibilities, then the learning process is really an exciting transformational time. So when you're doing a migration, the next thing that you have to think about is the scope of the whole project. That a migration can be a lot of different things. Just last week, I did a migration that was just a 3-hour transfer of the program. It was a very small business. It was a single user. He went from QuickBooks for Mac to QuickBooks Online. He didn't want to spend a lot of money. He didn't want a whole lot of hands-on. He just wanted the quick and dirty. So that's the low end of the spectrum. Or maybe you do the migration, but then you spend the rest of the day connecting the banking feeds, going through the settings, setting up the sales tax, setting up payroll, and a migration can then be a full day or maybe a 2-day engagement where you're really going through and giving the whole process. Then another scope, the next level of scope, is where you have a multi-day engagement. Maybe the data needs cleaning up. Maybe they are changing some of their workflows and you are integrating some new apps. And then sometimes it could be a multi-week project that is a whole metamorphosis of the entire QuickBooks experience, where you're taking advantage of new features and new workflows and third-party apps. An example of that was a migration that I did back in January that literally took a full month. They brought me on site. And what we did was we looked at the reports that they wanted to generate. What did they want to get out of the software? What reports did they want? And figuring out how to make QuickBooks give them those reports. And so we started like changing their classes entire system, implementing locations, bringing in the project center, adding on expense management, and migrating their payroll and turning it into this whole comprehensive system that was brand new workflows for the entire company. And that ran into a $40,000 project. So a migration can be anything from a couple hours and a couple $100 all the way to tens of thousands of dollars and weeks of time. And it depends on the scale of the client. It depends on what the client's needs are. Like I said, the way that I look at it is I generally work from the end to the beginning. What are the reports that they need? What do they want to get out of the system? And then it's up to the person doing the migration to orchestrate the project to get them those results. Another huge suggestion is incorporating training. What you don't want to do is just let them fly to figure it out at the end. The more pre-training you can do, the better. Because if they have gotten comfortable with it, if they've had a chance to put it through its paces and get used to what the new interface looks like, then when you do the cutover, then they're up and running. They can just start doing their basic work and they can start doing the troubleshooting for things that you hadn't thought about. So that way, the migration itself is not, there's some training involved for what's in front of you, but the overall training isn't happening where they're now at a standstill because you've made the cutover and they have no idea what to do. So the ways that I approach that training vary, again, with the company. You do have the test drive files. There's 2 links up on your screen right now. It's Craig's Design and Landscaping, and there's a plus version. That's the first link. And then there's an advanced version if you're migrating them to QBO Advanced. And I give all the employees those links, and I let them just start by playing around. And then after they've kind of just played around and looked around and gotten a feel for how it looks, then I say, okay, well, pretend this is your job. Make a couple invoices, take some payments, add in some receipts, and like try doing your normal routine work and either see if you can figure it out or let me guide you and show you how to do it. And a lot of the time when I do that, I record them. I'll either do a Zoom recording if it's virtual, or I'll set up Loom on their computer or QuickTime, and we'll actually record their procedures so that they have a reference guide that they can turn back on. Now, if you're a ProAdvisor, there are also client training resources in your portal that when you log into your QBOA, your QuickBooks Online for Accountants, and you look in the left-hand side, there's a tab that says ProAdvisor, and then under ProAdvisor are benefits. And when you look at the benefits tab and you go down that list, there's actual handouts that you can print out and give to your client. And so that way they have something to hold on their hand. We also have at RoyalWise, I've made these ready-made videos that start with the beginner's guide to QBO and then go into the boot camp of like, how do you do invoices and receipts and AR and AP and use the banking feed and reconciliation. And the videos that we have are agnostic, that it can be a bookkeeper learning how to use it, but it can also be the small business owner. And so you can actually make them an account and assign them videos, and they can actually go through and watch the videos ahead of time before the date of the migration. So those are some strategies that you can build in and find out what's right for you as far as training goes. Some ProAdvisors love doing training and you build your own resources, and others absolutely do not like doing any training. And if that's the case, if you either don't like doing training or you're not good at doing training, you can turn to royalwise.com and we can help you with that. Okay, there's also another book that I published a couple months ago that's called the QuickBooks Online from Setup to Tax Time. And this book is literally like, here's a feature and here's how to do it. And so it's nice that they can actually hold it in their hands. And when they need to make an estimate, they can just look up how to make an estimate and the instructions are right there in the book. And so that one is also on Amazon, and it makes a great client gift. I will actually show up to the migration and give them copies of the book so that everybody has a desk reference, and that gives them that sense of security to hold something in their hands. Okay, so you've figured out how you're going to add training in. The next thing that you need to do in order to determine the scope and start the conversion is to do a needs assessment. And when you are doing a needs assessment to find out how they're using their QuickBooks Desktop currently, it's important that you don't just talk to the business owner. You want to interview all of the employees who use the software. Some of them are going to be hands-on in the software. Others might just get the reports out of the software but need that information. So I interview anybody who either has their hands in the QuickBooks or has their hands in the results of the QuickBooks. Could be the business owner, it could be the managers, it could be the clerks or the front desk, it could be field service techs, people out in the field. And I'll ask them a whole series of questions, and I'm going to get into some of those questions in a minute, and find out how they use the software. And then as I'm doing the migration, I'll build in the features that they need or the information that they need, or build it into the workflows and procedures so that it's almost like they don't even know that it's not QuickBooks not doing those things. They don't know that it's the office workflows that are just natural. And so that way, when they're doing the migration, everybody's coming together as a team, as a unit, and you're designing the QuickBooks experience so that it meets everybody's needs. Now, when you start looking at what questions to ask those key players, the very, very, very first thing that you have to make sure is that QuickBooks Online is a good fit. QuickBooks Online is not the software for everybody. If they don't have internet where they are, they can't use QuickBooks Online. So that's always the first one. Now, fortunately, that's pretty rare these days. Then I'll take a look at the features that they're using in QuickBooks Desktop and confirm that those exact features are available in QuickBooks Online as well. And if they're not, we'll find out what third-party apps can pick up those gaps. And then where the excitement comes in is the opposite. What workflows are they doing now that are really cumbersome and awkward that by moving to QuickBooks Online, they're going to be able to eliminate? Now, that's where the excitement comes in, because maybe they're taking information off of one place and they're putting it in another spreadsheet over here, and then they're moving that spreadsheet and importing it into desktop. Well, maybe you can cut out the middleman and cut out a lot of those steps. So I usually find that the move to QuickBooks Online streamlines a lot of their workflows and cuts out steps and cuts out time. So you want to look for those opportunities in order to transform their business management. Okay. Now, when I'm going through that analysis, what I like to look at is I look at their AR workflows and I look at their AP workflows. So I look at their accounts receivable and their accounts payable. What are their systems that they have in place? What is their documentation? We'll take a look at what project management software they're using. Are they using Asana, or are they using Trello? Or are they using something industry specific? How do they communicate together? What apps are they using to track all of their daily tasks? And either they will continue using those, or we can adapt them to work in this new workflow. I'll take a look at their employee time tracking and their time cards. Might be a recommendation for using QuickBooks Time, which fully integrates, or maybe they need to keep using external payroll and external time tracking. So we take a look at how they're gathering their employee information. I'll check in with their payroll. Are they using QuickBooks Payroll, and are we migrating it? Do they use third-party payroll, and maybe we can just keep it in place? Or maybe this is an opportunity to move into QBO Payroll so everything is all under one roof. I'll also take a look at what's other external software they're using. Do they have some current integrations that we need to port over? Are they using some industry-specific software, and does that integrate with QuickBooks Online? Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So when I'm doing this needs assessment, I'm really getting a whole comprehensive look at not just how they're using their QuickBooks, but what are the pain points in their daily business operations? And is this an opportunity to transform how they do their work and transform their relationship to their data? Then we actually look at the software itself. So we'll take a look at how they're using their QuickBooks Desktop. What features are they using? Do those features migrate completely seamlessly and they'll be able to just pick up where they left off? Are there some things that will need to be done differently where you can still do it, but the steps are different? Are there some things that they're using that aren't in QBO at all? And what are we going to do instead? Does it need an app? Do we just need to drop it and say, oh, well, that was nice, but we don't do it anymore? Or can we create a workaround to get to the same end goal? And then we'll also take a look at anything that needs to be rebuilt and started over with a fresh start or recreated. I also take a look at whether they should do a fresh start. If you're looking at their numbers and you're looking at their balance sheet and their profit loss report and you know that they're not right, or the business owner says, yeah, well, we don't even run our reports because they're meaningless, then you know that you've got an issue with your data, that you've probably got errors in the workflows and their data might need a cleanup. Maybe they've got a list of old customers, but they haven't seen some of these customers in 5 or 10 years. Maybe they've got vendors that they used to do procurement from that they don't anymore. Maybe their products list is full of old products and services that they haven't used in a couple of years. So it's also an opportunity to think about, well, maybe starting over again would be a better thing to do, especially like, right now, actually migrating the desktop file over. Maybe we take a look at last year's taxes or the trial balance and then import the trial balance and all of the starting figures for December 31st of last year, and then use the banking feeds to bring in the transactions and just do a quick and dirty catch up and then pick up with the details from here. So sometimes a fresh start is a much better idea than doing an actual migration or conversion of their existing data. One thing to also realize is that all these things that I'm talking about, this is a paid assessment. These are some deep questions. Sometimes it just takes an hour meeting, and sometimes it might take several hours to go through and do all these interviews and all of the needs assessments. So you want to make sure that you are getting paid for this work. And what I do is I record the sessions. I also have a spreadsheet that I use that was put out by Intuit probably like 2021. It's aging out a little bit as the software has changed, but I do find it pretty good. And so the link is on your screen right now. And then what I do is I open up that spreadsheet and I save a copy specifically for them. And I run through all the lists of all the questions. And that allows me to document literally everything about the project that I'm going to have to pay attention to and build in. And what I do is I provide that to the client. The client gets the recording and they get a copy of that spreadsheet. So they've actually paid me for an outcome. They've paid me for a result. And maybe we book the project and that way I've done my due diligence and I can just jump in and start. Or maybe for some reason they decide not to go with me. My feelings aren't hurt. I've given them the foundation that they need to have a successful migration. So these are always paid needs assessments and everybody gets the results. Okay, now the next section is deciding what version of QuickBooks Online is right for you. And given the length of time that we had and who is on this call, I know that most of you are already a little familiar with QBO, so I only want to just kind of get into the nutshell. I have on my screen 4 different of the versions, but there's even simple, Ledger before this and Solopreneur. And so there's additional versions, but these are the core that I tend to try to place them in. Simple Start is good for one user, and all they're really doing is invoicing. They don't have any accounts payable. When a bill comes in, they just pay it and they're good to go. Essentials gives up to 3 users and adds in accounts payable workflows. Plus gives you up to 5 users and gives class tracking, location tracking, the project center, which gives you job costing and inventory. And then the advanced version gives you up to 25 users, and it gives you unlimited charts of accounts, unlimited classes, really robust custom fields, bulk transaction entry and really creative reporting where you can craft any kind of report that you need. So I work with the client, and when I use that needs assessment Excel checklist that I mentioned previously, it actually, like you say, are they doing this? Yes, yes, no, 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 no. And then one of the tabs says, oh, they're going to need plus, or they're going to need advanced. And then that way the needs assessment does the placement for me. I also talked to them about the different modules that are in QBO that are add-ons. The merchant services, I hook almost everybody up to the merchant services, even if they have a POS system, even if they have an e-commerce system, because sometimes it's just that much more convenient to be able to send an invoice and have somebody pay it. So depending on what their system is, not everybody uses it, but there's never any harm done in hooking somebody up with the merchant services as a plan B backup system. I'll always talk about the new online bill pay to them. That is, how are they paying their bills? Are they printing out checks? Are they logging into their bank and sending out the payments through their bank? This gives them an opportunity to not have to create the expense in QuickBooks and then create the expense at their bank or their outside pay system, that they can create a bill and pay it right through QuickBooks Online. So that's a great opportunity for some streamlining. We'll take a look at QBO payroll and whether they already have desktop payroll and we're migrating in. Maybe they're starting payroll for the first time. Maybe they're going to stick to their third-party software. That is totally fine as well. We'll also take a look at contractor payments. If they have 1099 contractors, I'll talk about the methods that are in QuickBooks Online for paying them out automatically. And then I'll also take a look at QuickBooks Checking and see if that's a good solution for them. Now, some, I wouldn't touch it. Others, I personally love QuickBooks Checking. I have my QuickBooks Payments Merchant Services put all of its payments in the QuickBooks Checking account, and then that's what I use for payroll and sales tax because they all are integrated together. So it makes this kind of nice little workflow where the money comes in, the money comes out, and it's completely separate from their operations checking account. And QuickBooks Checking gets 5% interest, which is way more than I get from Bank of America. So we always talk about whether we should set up a QuickBooks Checking account for them or not. Okay. So something else to know, if you are ProAdvisors, you do get wholesale rates for your clients. So instead of having somebody go to the QuickBooks website and subscribe from there, you want them to do it from you, through you. You can either add them to your wholesale program so that you're paying for their subscription and you're just building it into your monthly charges to the client, or you can pay them separately. Or you can give them a direct discount where they get 30% off for the first year, but they're paying for it themselves. So there's lots of different ways that you can do the financing on it. One thing that's brand new that they're just rolling out right now is that they're splitting the costs into the static costs and the variable costs, meaning that it used to be that if you were going to take on the billing, you had to do all of it. But payroll rates changed by the number of employees, and online bill pay changes by the number of payments that you make, or contractors by the number of contractors that you pay. And so up until literally, I think today, if you were having the wholesale billing and paying for the subscription, you were sometimes paying a little bit more and a little bit less, and maybe the customer wasn't paying the rest of it. So now they've made it so that you can pay for the QBO subscription component and they can pay for the online bill pay, the merchant services, the contract center, and the payroll, so that as their rates change, you don't have to do any chasing of your own tail. Also, QuickBooks service providers might be a good way to go. They call them QSPs. The one that I use is Complete Business Group, and I have a sample page, a link up here. And this is the link that I use when I sign up my clients for QuickBooks Online, where they go and they fill in the form, we order the software, and then we get better rates. Even the merchant services gets wholesale discounted rates too. And they also have their own direct support at Intuit. So I have direct people to call if there's an issue with payroll or if there's an issue with QuickBooks payments. I don't even have to pick up the phone and call support, I can get the support through Complete Business Group. So I'm a big fan of CBG. Okay, now let's get into the nuts and bolts of doing the migration. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the things that are different between desktop and online. So, well, actually, I'm going to start with the things that are the same. So all your transactions are going to convert. All of the list fields that are populated are everything in your drop downs, those are all going to move over. All of the settings that are relevant are going to set to those defaults. Your memorized transactions are going to become recurring transactions. And so you're going to find that all of the basics are there. But some things do change. Inventory in desktop is calculated as average cost. And in QuickBooks Online, it's FIFO, which is first in, first out, and actually technically more accurate. So the difference there is that inventory in desktop, when you buy and sell, it just looks at all of the prices that you have paid to buy the stock, and whatever that average is what gets moved from inventory asset to cost of goods at the time of the sale. QuickBooks Online does first in, first out. So whatever you paid for the very items that are selling right now is what moves from one to the other. So it's technically more accurate. But if you are over $1 million in revenue, you are actually going to have to file a form with the IRS and let them know that your inventory basis is changing. If you are using the other names list, all of the other names are all going to come over as vendors. If you're converting your payroll, any employees that have been on payroll in this fiscal year are going to come over as active, even if they've been terminated and inactivated. But because there were payroll transactions, and it needs to bring those over, they get reactivated, and then you can just inactivate them when you're done. The payroll history that comes over is summarized. You don't get all the nitty-gritty of all of the breakdowns of all of the checks. All of the numbers are right, and all of the tax payments are all there, and all of the paycheck amounts are all there, but it's not broken up into the same granular detail. You get summaries instead. If you have item types that aren't in QuickBooks Online, they're going to become either non-inventory or services, like sales tax or payment methods, or there's 9 different inventory types or product and service, item types. 9 different item types in QuickBooks Desktop, but in QuickBooks Online, there's only 4. So they're going to come over a little bit differently. And along those lines, your sales tax in desktop, you might have been doing sales tax line by line on each of the items. QuickBooks Online has a whole sales tax center. So those sales tax lines are no longer needed. And so that's going to be part of the transformation. Okay. Now, there are also some things that don't convert at all. And most of these things are things that not a whole lot of people use, but occasionally they're mission critical. And so you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, that if they are using these, what are you going to do to compensate instead? So vendor discount terms, that's like if you have 2% net 10, meaning if you pay within 10 days, it subtracts 2% off the price of the bill. You have to handle those manually. Those are not there. Your attachments are no longer going to be attached to the transaction. So you're going to want to save your original attachments folder so that if you're audited or something, that you have the original backup. Moving forward, all of the transactions, you'll be able to attach your new receipts and documentation to the transactions, but they don't come over automatically. There's no such thing as inventory assemblies. There is inventory bundles, but they don't work exactly the same way. There's no units of measure, for example. So you can't buy a case of something and then use one of that case in this inventory assembly. If you need that kind of inventory build, then you're going to need to use an inventory software like SOS Inventory or Katana or a third-party app instead of doing it natively inside QBO. Your budgets do move over, but balance sheet budgets don't yet move over, but they've only been out for a couple months. So I think that's something that a year from now that might change. Custom form styles don't come over. And in fact, the custom form styles work completely differently than the layout designer in desktop. So if you had all kinds of custom layouts, you don't get the same granular control that you had in QBO. And it's actually been kind of funny because when I'm doing a conversion, sometimes that's what the owner gets hung up on is like they want their invoice to look a certain way. And the truth is that your client probably doesn't even give two thoughts to what it actually looks like. Like at no point has anybody ever said, "Oh, I don't like what this invoice looks like. I'm not going to do business with them." So this is one of those change management and attitude management things that I was talking about where you just kind of have to say, "Look, not everything's going to be the same. This is something that you can let go. It's not a deal breaker." Okay. If you have third-party apps, those third-party apps may just migrate over where you just log in through QBO and attach it, and then you're up and running. But sometimes they may have a desktop version and a QBO version, and you may have to actually do a migration on the third-party app as well, or switch third-party apps. So you definitely have to do due diligence on those. And if you're using QuickBooks for Mac, you can convert to online, but the conversion tool does not include inventory. So if you're doing inventory in QuickBooks for Mac, you have a two-step process. First, you have to convert your QuickBooks for Mac over to QuickBooks Desktop for PC, and then you can do the imports. Okay. Now, some things will come across, but they don't come across ideally. And the ones that fall into this category are things that have multi-phases, like progress invoicing and estimates. If you had estimates in desktop that you have built several invoices off of, when you convert them, you're going to have the estimate and you're going to have the invoices, but the invoices are not going to do the progress on the estimate and bring the estimate down and down and down stage by stage. Same thing with purchase orders and bills. You'll still have the purchase order and you'll have the bill, but the bill and the purchase order will not be linked. The way to solve those is you open up the invoice. Let's say it's the invoicing. You open up the invoice, and when you do, you're going to see the estimate in a drawer on the right-hand side, and then you can add the estimate to the invoice and then replace the dollar amount that came over on the line item into the line that's linked to the estimate, and then delete the one that came over for migration. So it's a little painstaking. It's not easy. I mean, it's not hard. It's just elaborate and time consuming. This is one of those things that I call nighttime laptop work, where I'll sit in front of the TV with my laptop on my lap going in and reattaching all of the transactions. But I only do that for open projects. I do not do that for all of the history. What's done is done, not an issue. I only do that for things that are currently needed and currently tracked. Also, if your system involved journal entries with AR and AP, those might not have come across and as a payment. So, for example, there are Chamber of Commerce software where all they do is they import in the journal entries. And when you look at the clients, they show 0 AR. But when you run an AR aging summary, you see their name on the list with a 0 in the 90-day column. So what's happened is you have all of the payments, and they're all zeroing out, but they're not attached. There's no payment attaching the credit and the original invoice. So what I generally wind up doing is making a new payment for that customer and then checking off all the invoices and checking off all of the journal entries or credit memos down below and just using them all up. It equals 0. I save it. You're done. But you have to go through that for every single one of those clients. Also, sales orders don't come over. You can use estimates. They work pretty much the same way as a sales order, but there are no sales orders in QuickBooks Online. Okay, now the things that I've just said are always changing. So there is a website, and Joel, can you switch over to the website for me? This is a website in, let me, can't find it. Hang on a sec. Here we go. So this page is everything, the current status of all of the migration tools. And so there's features that move and don't move over. There are the items that move over, the preferences, and I actually go through and update my materials every couple months based on the things that have changed here. So everything that I'm telling you is subject to change. Could be a year, could be 6 months, could be a month from now. So I always go over to this website and use this as a reference. And when we give you the notes, you'll have that as well. Okay, Joel, can you switch me back over, please? Okay, and the book that I mentioned, the one that was just published today, also goes into far more detail than I'm going now. I really go granularly, feature by feature by feature, pretty much pulled off of the website, so that you have that comparative copy that you can use almost like a checklist. Okay, now I mentioned bad data, and it's really super important that you clean up first and get ready for it. So the first thing is the file too big? If what you do in desktop is press your F2 key or Control 1, and you look at your targets where it says total targets, and it has to be under 750,000 targets. If the file is bigger than 250,000 targets, you actually need to do a condense and like pick, maybe you want to be 5 years back. Maybe you just want to be 3 years back. And what it will do is it will cut off the data, summarize all of the history so that you're just migrating over the last few years. And then you can even get rid of customers you're not using and things like that. Then the steps that you have to do in your desktop. You do have to be using desktop 2021 or more recent, and you want to go in and you want to run an update on it because that will update the migration tools. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go from 21 to 22 to 23 to 24. I don't mean that. I just mean in the version that you're in, you want to make sure you have the most recent release. You'll make a backup, but even the migration doesn't touch your data anyway. All you're doing is importing it. So you don't have to worry at all about your data. It's not like it's sucking up the data and bringing it up to the cloud. Your file is your file. Your file is going to be fine. You might want to go through and turn off some extra unnecessary preferences. If you have old customers or vendors that you don't want in your QBO, inactivate them in desktop first because only the active ones are going to come over. And then that way you can kind of clean up your data. Products and services, items, vendors, customers, go ahead and inactivate anything you don't want to see in QBO. And then you want to do a verify and a rebuild on your data to make sure it's all clean and accurate and there's no data errors. Now, Judy's asking, what if they have a version older than 2021? You can try it, but generally what I do in that case is I take their desktop file and I upgrade it into my current version of desktop, and then do the migration from inside my current version. Okay, when you're doing the import, if you're in desktop or Premiere, you would go up to the company menu and there's an option for export company to QuickBooks Online. If you're in desktop, that option isn't there. But if you go to that F2 screen that we were just looking at and you do Control B, Control Q, the migration tool will pop up. If you're using QuickBooks for Mac, you'll go up to File and then Export and to QuickBooks Online. Then it will have you log in. You will have already had to create your QBO file. That's the step that we were talking about earlier, where you go ahead and you actually create the subscription. Then here you would log into it. I do recommend that you do this step using the user's username and password, not your username and password as a ProAdvisor. I heard just one, but that's all it takes, one nightmare story about somebody overwriting their own your books and their own QBOA because it didn't say which firm. It didn't do the firm question. It's rare. I've only heard of it once, but I always have use the business owner's login from when they created the subscription. When it's ready, you'll get an email. It can take several hours depending on how much data, so you do need to be patient. Then the next thing that I do is verify the data. So what you want to do is in desktop and in QBO, run a profit and loss and run a balance sheet. You want them all for all dates, accrual based. Doesn't matter if they're cash based. This is just to capture every single transaction in the entire system. And then I'll hold the reports up side by side and go down line by line and make sure that everything came over perfectly. Now, you will see some changes, like the inventory asset and the cost of goods may be different on the two reports, but they should be different by the same dollar amount. And that's because of the recalculation from average cost to FIFO. So if you see that both reports are wrong, see if that's what it is and see if it's the same dollar amount that just moved from the balance sheet to the profit and loss or vice versa. Now, if you see something else that's different, then you need to do some digging around. And sometimes you might have to try the import twice. Usually it comes over just fine. All right, now, after I have verified those reports and have made sure that everything is hunky-dory, the next thing I'll do is repeat the most recent reconciliations. The reconciliation status of all the transactions in the account registers, bank registers, credit card registers, all still have the R's. But when you go to reconcile, it says you've never reconciled before. And that's because you have it in QBO. So I'll just go get the last statement, the last thing that was reconciled, put in that statement date, put in that dollar amount, do the reconciliation. It should come to 0, and then you've established the first initial reconciliation. I do, however, find sometimes that they've not been reconciling properly. When I do this, they've got old transactions that have just been sitting there, and this is one of those opportunities to do a cleanup, because the only thing that should be left on a reconciliation are pending transactions or uncleared checks, uncashed checks, not payroll errors from 2019. And along the same line with that bad data and those errors, that some transactions that you got used to seeing in desktop to the point that, like, yeah, don't even see them anymore. When you get over to QBO and you've got a new interface, all of a sudden you're like, well, why is that number there? And like, oh, well, the QBO did something wrong. No, you swept something under the rug in desktop and didn't notice, and now it becomes glaringly obvious in QBO. So that's one of those reasons I like to do the cleanups. A couple examples, like I mentioned, the AR and AP summary reports for the customers and vendors who have $0 balances. You just need to go and run another payment and tie them all up to make them disappear. Billable expenses, though, can be a really big deal. In QuickBooks Desktop, every expense has a billable check mark, and that billable check mark is supposed to be if you are passing that expense on to a customer's next invoice for reimbursement. But some business owners are just like, yeah, I'm being billed for this. Let me put a check mark there. And when we come over to QBO, I had a client who had $15 million with over 100,000 transactions that were all unbilled expenses because they had checked billable on every single money out transaction for 10 years. So the two ways of fixing that is there's a link up on your screen. This is not on a menu. You have to have this link where you erase everything after apps and you put in manage billable expense, and it brings up a tool where you can put in the date before which you don't want those check marks anymore, and it will go ahead and uncheck all those check marks. If you have a lot of them, you actually have to do it in small chunks. I'll go back 10 years, 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, and take them off in stages. And if that doesn't work for any reason, the other option is just to make a new invoice for each customer, pull on all the unbilled transactions, save it, and then void it. And then all of that will go away, but you have to do one for every single client on your client list. Okay, now this is where we get into, remember how I was talking about Concierge Services, where as a ProAdvisor, you get to really create this wonderful experience for your clients in this process. So these are are optional, but they make you a hero because you're helping them design their ideal system. Go into the payment methods and take out Discover and add in Venmo and PayPal. Go into the terms and take out the net 60 that they never use and make sure that their terms are actually there. Go in and talk to them about the customers and make sure nothing else gets to be inactivated. Maybe merge your vendors together. That if they have tons of one-off miscellaneous vendors that only have one transaction over 10 years, this is a chance to inactivate them or maybe merge them. In QuickBooks Online, something that's different from desktop is that it's actually okay to have a couple generic vendors like restaurants or gas stations or parking lots. And the reason why it's okay in online, where it might not have been in desktop, is that the bank detail that comes in from the banking feed includes that name and it travels with the expense. And you can even have a setting to copy it into the memo. So that way you can still know that they went to McDonald's, but it doesn't have McDonald's in the vendor list. It just says restaurant. So it's an opportunity for a little bit of streamlining. This is also an opportunity to inactivate categories that have never been used in the chart of accounts or ones that you no longer need. Sometimes you can merge certain accounts together. QuickBooks Online does have its own set of chart of accounts entries that you do have to honor and leave alone. But then some things like sales tax or payroll tax, the chart of accounts liabilities and expenses come in with different names, and you have the choice then of either inactivating the ones that came in from desktop or merging them into the new ones created by QuickBooks Online. All right. If people have questions, you are welcome to go into the comments and look at all of those. Okay. So go in, and if you have questions, please do ask. All right. Now, the next thing that you want to do in a complete concierge setup is customize the new file. Like I just mentioned, or no, I didn't mention this yet. First, go into the account and settings. Go in and go through all of the settings and dial them in. Do they need this? Do they not need this? Explain what they all are. Get everything turned on. So you go down the left-hand side, company usage, sales, expenses, and advanced. Pour through the settings, turn things on and off, because there are some settings that control the whole experience, like the project center and inventory. And so they might want to take a look at those. Okay, now Denise actually asks, if you do an import into QuickBooks Online, but the data wasn't good, can you actually re-import and override the data? You can. You actually have 60 days that you can either just do another import and overwrite the data, or there's a command where you put purge company at the end and it will wipe the whole thing clean and you can do it again. So you can have a couple tries if you need to. So if you import your data and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't like the way this looks, you can go back to desktop, do your due diligence and clean up, and then try again. Okay, now Himant is asking, what are some of the benefits of using QBO versus desktop from an efficiency point of view? That is a whole different question about a whole different course, and I have 8 minutes left just to talk about conversions. But please go. I have a free class called The Beginner's Guide to QBO, completely free. It's at royalwise.com, The Beginner's Guide to QBO, and that's specifically that question answered, where I show all of the different features that are in QuickBooks Online that are not in desktop, so that you can take a look at the opportunities to streamline and become more efficient. Okay. Getting back in for, I think I've had 7 minutes left. Oh my God, I could talk about this for hours. Okay, the next part is inventory. If you're creating new inventory items during this process, don't date them today with the current balance or the current inventory count, because if you have any historic transactions that you're still working with, if there's anything before that date, it won't take them. So I always backdate my inventory by 2 years at zero quantity, and then either use bills to purchase or invoices to sell, or do inventory adjustments to get my inventory counts trued up. The custom form styles, I'll always ask my client, like, and I'll show them where it is. And some of them are like, yeah, I don't need you to do that. I can go ahead and do that. And others are very happy to have me walk through the entire custom form style design and setup. Okay, then the next thing that you need to do in the setup is turn on different modules. So like I mentioned, I always turn on merchant services. That's what allows people to get paid by credit card and ACH. And in the new invoice experience, they're also adding PayPal and Venmo. This also allows them to make recurring sales receipts where it can automatically charge their customers on the first of the month automatically and send them a receipt. Your invoices get a review and pay button. The rates are even cheaper than Square and PayPal, and then you don't have to deal with the fees and capturing those missing fees. And when you send an invoice and they pay it, it will create the payment, put it in undeposited funds, batch the group together, match it to the banking feed, and put it in the register. And you don't have to touch it. It does it all. So that's why I'm such a fan of merchant services. I will go in with them and turn on the sales tax module. And so we'll turn it on. We'll set up the state. We'll set up their local taxes if needed. And then there's additional stuff that you need to do. You need to make your products taxable and make sure that every product has the correct tax rate in it. You need to see if you have customers who are exempt. And then you also need to go through the sales tax center and clean that up. Now, that's like the 1-minute explanation. There's a whole section in my Converting Desktop book about what to do with sales tax. And I have a whole 2-hour course on using the sales tax center correctly. And when you use it correctly, the sales tax center is great. But if you don't use it correctly, the sales tax center is completely inaccurate. It's pretty intricate. It's really good if you set it up right. Exact same thing can be said for payroll. So with payroll, once you do your conversion, it should have converted over your employees. So you can verify all of your year-to-date numbers. And you also want to go through and make sure that your tax history is all paid. So you want to kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb. One of the things that I do is I always start with payroll elite level, the expensive payroll for the first month. That way I can have them do the work, and QuickBooks support will go through and confirm all of the payroll for me, and we'll run it for a few cycles so that if there's any problems, they'll pay the fees as well. And then after we know that things are running smoothly, I'll back them down to premium or core. Okay, now the project center is one of the ahs for my customers who I'm migrating over, because there's nothing like it at all in desktop. So like Hemant, this is one of the answers to your questions. So the project center is in QBO Plus and Advanced, and it's where you can track all of your job costing and your job profitability in a whole graphical dashboard with built-in reports. So all of the expenses and income for one sub-customer are all together in one place. You can see your profitability by job. You can job cost your labor. It's phenomenal. And it's one of the things, remember when I was talking about that change management? This is one of the areas where I focus on, and we actually create their new workflows by teaching them to go to the project center first, and then everything stems out from there. And this is one of the biggest areas of delight in QuickBooks Online. There's also receipt capture that you can upload receipts from the computer and attach them. You can forward emails that came in with PDFs and JPEGs, and that will attach the receipts to the transactions. You can also pull up the QBO app on your phone and take pictures of your receipts, and they will just show up in QuickBooks ready to be accepted on the banking feed. So I will always walk through the client and make sure that they know that this is there. This is one that they will not discover on their own. It's up to you during the conversion to show them the gloriousness of the receipt capture. After I've done all of that, we'll add in the user accounts and set them up with the necessary levels of access. And there are even some where you can set up the employees with free accounts so that they can do their time cards. So this is one of the things I do at the end. Then I set up the banking feeds. And the banking feed is the hallmark of QuickBooks Online. Also, the answer to Human's question about what are some of the efficiencies. The banking feed in QBO blows away the banking feed in desktop. It's amazing how much it can automate. So you link your checking accounts, your savings accounts, your credit cards. Don't connect personal accounts, obviously. And then if you're doing a migration and you want to actually go back all the way to the beginning of the year, you can go download the transactions from the bank's website and then import them into QBO and then do batch data entry all at once. And so you can actually go in, and sometimes I can do a year's worth of data entry in a day. That's not my standard procedure because we're kind of letting go of some of the detail in exchange for the expediency, but the banking feed is amazing. And I have a 3-hour class on how to use the banking feed. And so it's a great class for you to learn all the tips and tricks. And it's also a great class to send your clients so that they can learn how to do it properly. Now, when you do connect the banking feeds, it will sometimes create an extra pre-reconciled transaction that's in opening balance equity that sometimes might be right, but sometimes might be wrong. So if you're doing that first reconciliation that I was talking about earlier, and it's not squaring up, go to the register and look for an extra transaction on the first day of the bank connection and look and see if it already has an R in it, and then you can delete it or you can edit it and adjust it for whatever it's supposed to be. But this one trips people up. And this is also an opportunity to create rules, especially if you're doing a year's worth of data entry all at once. You can go in and make owners draw rules or gas station rules or restaurant rules and have it find all of the gas stations and put them all to gas station all at once. And then that will save you tons of time of having to do every transaction one at a time. Okay, then comes third-party apps. And one thing to realize is that QuickBooks Online is not meant to be all things to all people. Desktop is meant to be, it's like almost like bloatware, like every possible thing you can think of, but most people don't ever use. Whereas in QBO, you create a whole custom environment where QuickBooks Online is the general ledger piece of it. And then if you have specialized needs, you add on different tools that solve specific pain points. That way, every company gets a customized experience. So when you're thinking about apps, what needs do you have that aren't in QBO? What outside software are they already using that you can integrate? Do you have redundant tasks? Do you have 2 or 3 people doing something similar? Maybe you can totally use an app to streamline those steps. Do you have employees that you don't want in QBO? Have them do their work in an external app that imports into QuickBooks. And in order to find out more about apps, look in your left navigation down towards the bottom. You'll see apps, and that takes you to apps.com, which is Intuit's App Center with literally hundreds of apps that have all been vetted to be really good, solid solutions for working with QuickBooks Online. So apps are definitely a huge benefit. And if you're going, well, this is already really expensive. Why? I don't want to spend that much money, and I sure don't want to spend more money on apps. The biggest thing to think about with the cost of QuickBooks Online, even though, yeah, I think it's a little expensive for some small businesses, think about the time savings for the different efficiencies that are built in. If the banking feed saves you 1 hour a week in not having to do data entry for every single transaction that comes in. And let's say your salary is $25 an hour, which is going to be low. But 4 weeks at $25 is $100. And if the Quick QBO Plus costs $99, you actually just saved money because that's not going to be the only efficiency. So, and then there's no servers to support. there's no multi-user. That was another question that came up. And Joel, if you want to put that up there from Debbie, do you have to deal with single user and multi-user in QBO? QBO is multi-user by default. QBO is you create the number of logins according to your subscription level. So you could have 5 people, 25 people all logged in at the same time. No IT, no servers to support. They're just logging in off of Chrome, off of their own computer. So your IT and admin, backend admin costs plummet or are completely limited. And that's why QBO actually comes in to be a bargain. Okay, now I know that I'm going over my hour, but I feel like I'm still giving you guys good information, so I'm going to keep going. If you have to go, you can come back to these live streams later on or the Earmark app. Okay, I've been taking questions as we've been going, so I think we're good with that. Oh, actually here, my time is good. So a little bit of wrapping up. I've given you a lot to think about. So I want to give you some places you can go to get more information. You've noticed my logo is an owl. We call us the Royal Wise Owls because it stands for the on-demand web-based learning solution. And what we have is a learning management system for learning how to use QBO. So here we are looking at conversions, and some of you have never used QBO before. So we take it from the very, very, very beginning of, I've never seen QuickBooks Online. I don't get what the big deal is. I took a look at it and I hated it. Remember that QBO evolves. So if you are a desktop user and you haven't actually checked out QBO for a couple years, it changes and it gets better and better and better. So we start off with the beginner's guide to QBO, and then we go into my boot camp or the setting up from QuickBooks Online from setup to tax time that teaches you all the basic fundamentals. Then I have a course on payroll, a course on sales tax, a course on the banking fees, a course on reconciling, a course on literally just about every single feature that there is. And so you can take one individual course on demand and get CPE. Here are a couple of my suggestions. So if you have your phone right now, you can grab those QR codes. But the boot camp is one of my most popular. It's kind of like our flagship course. There's 10 best practices in QuickBooks Online. There's a tricky situations class. That's a little bit more advanced. That's like, how do I do bartering and what do I do if I bounce a check and how do I handle car loans, things like that. And then if you like all the efficiency strategies, there's online hacks. And so those are my tips and tricks. Now there's a course I didn't list on here that I really should have, and that's my QBO for ProAdvisors class, where I talk about all of the benefits that you as a QuickBooks desktop expert get when you're moving over to QBO. And also, remember when I talked about that emotional change management, how to get your head screwed on straight so that you're feeling good and excited about all of the possibilities. So that again is my QBOA for ProAdvisors class. Now, if you're listening to me and like, oh my God, I want that class and that class and that class, I do have site-wide memberships, and my silver membership gives you access to the whole library. So you literally can log in and say, type in payroll, and it will bring in all the courses where I mentioned payroll and all the different parts of payroll, or sales tax and all the different parts about sales tax. And then you can watch those videos. The silver also includes a community forum where people ask each other questions and we all contribute our best knowledge. And then the gold membership includes an hour with me every single month as a coach so that I can help you hands-on actually in QuickBooks. Like you pull up a client situation, like, well, how do I do this? And I show you what to do in QuickBooks. Okay. Now, for all of those things, if you want to give us a try, the coupon code setting up QBO will give you 10% off any of my courses or subscription memberships. And so you can go to royalwise.com, or my learning management system is at learn.royalwise.com, and use the code setting up QBO, all one word, and that will give you 10% off anything that you sign up for. If you are part of a firm, we also have a partner program with affiliate links. So if you want to recommend a specific course to one of your clients, they can pay for the course, but you'll get 10% referral. And if you're part of a firm and you have a lot of employees to train or a lot of clients to train, you can actually white label my portal and offer your own training portal as well. So you can hit me up offline and we can talk about those things. We call that the Quest portal. I mentioned the Unofficial QuickBooks Accountants podcast. In a nutshell, in this hour that I gave you, Hector and I actually talked about all of these things for 4 hours. So you can go listen to episodes 23, 24, 25, and 28, where we talk about all of these same topics, but you get Hector's contributions as well. And then I just published literally today a 70-page book about this topic. So everything that I touched on today, I go into depth. And so if you head over to Amazon and go look for this book, you can either grab the code off of the page right now, or just look for Alicia Katz Pollock, Converting from QuickBooks Desktop to Online, and buy the book. It's only $10, and it essentially gives you a whole checklist of every single thing that you want to do as you're doing this concierge approach to a desktop conversion. So summarizing everything with desktop, with a conversion, it could just be, what button do I click to move the data from desktop to online? And it could be, how can I help my client transform their business by taking advantage of all the new features that QuickBooks Online has to offer, and how can I help them craft a whole new approach to doing business? So your migrations can absolutely run the scale. It could be the style you choose or client by client, but I really encourage you to use this as an opportunity to upscale your services. Okay, so thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all for staying for an extra 10 minutes as well. My name is Alicia Katz Pollock, and I will see you in the next class.
Thank you, Alicia, for that wonderful webinar, and thank you to all of our attendees today. And have a great rest of your day.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.